Welcome to the Dad 77 podcast, Kerry Briggs. We are continuing our study through 1 Corinthians. We are in chapter 7. There's lots of information in the previous podcast on Corinthians, and it is something that you should go back and listen to. Now, here Paul just comes off of talking about the guy in the church who actually was sleeping with his father's wife. Basically says kick him out of the church. It goes into 7 and starts talking about marriage, some other things, and then he continues in chapter 7 on he actually covers a lot of things. He covers being single, being married, living in the world, how you should act and react, and a lot of information. It's a fairly large chapter, but I think we'll get through it fairly quickly because I'm going to read a lot of it. A lot of it is just you take it as it says. There's not a reason to comment on it. If it's point blank, this is A, this is B, this is C, then that's the way it is. So he goes from sexual immorality in 6, and then he goes and he basically discusses being single, being married, and he goes on. Some people are not going to like what is I'm going to say and what Paul says. They're just not going to like it. They're going to avoid it. So this is one of those chapters that you really need to not just go, okay, yeah, I got it, and move on, but you need to actually think about this and how it actually plays out in your life, your family's life, and your church's life, and people you know. Some people are not going to like it because in our society, we've moved to a place that my rights are more important than anything else, and no one, not even the church, and frankly that also means God, is going to tell me anything that is against my rights. It's my right, and that's the way it is. And you know, Hollywood and society has influenced and tried to remove strong men from the scene, that the strong men in the family is been played down, and they've tried to eliminate that. You know why? Because God set an order in place, and he had a design, and pesky thing. I'm pretty sure God knew what he was talking about. It's just something tells me that he did. But society is trying to erase the family unit, trying to erase who's in charge, trying to erase how what is important in a marriage, to the point of, well, it goes back to kind of like, well, you have rights. You should stand up for your rights. It gets to a point where in some houses, the kids run the show. Some houses, the wife runs the show. And Hollywood and society has tried to erase strong men from doing their job, and it kind of turns the family roles all upside down. So strap in and let's see what God and Paul has to say on this. One caution with this is if you finish, because some people will click off. But if you finish this teaching, You need to decide, and you decide, I ain't doing that. Just understand that you're opposing Paul's teaching and you're opposing God. In chapter 7, and Paul is very specific, this is from God, this is from me, my wisdom with my years that I have. And we will see that. So let's get into it. 1 Corinthians 1 Corinthians 7, 1 through 8. Now, concerning the things about which you wrote me. So they wrote him a letter. He heard about the dude from apparently whoever brought him the letter, but they wrote Paul a letter. We don't really have any access to what was written other than Paul's responses. They obviously were talking about marriage. They were talking about divorce. They were talking about sexual immorality and where it fits in and how does that all come together. So they wrote him, and he is answering the letter that they wrote. So now concerning the things about which you wrote, it is good for a man not to touch a woman, meaning stay single and not single playing the field. But because of sexual immoralities, that's what we've been talking about in the last 2-3 chapters and podcasts. Because of sexual immoralities that is happening in Corinthians, and oh, by the way, it is happening today in the church, and the church is going like this. Well, you don't want to offend anyone. So here we go. Each man should have his own wife, and each woman is to have her own husband. The husband must fulfill his duty to his wife, and likewise the wife also to her husband. And that is just not in the bedroom. That, of course, is in the bedroom, but it's also in leading the family, responsibilities in the family, and making the family unit work. In the day-to-day life. Verse 4, the wife does not have authority over her own body, but the husband does, and likewise the husband also does not have authority over his own body, but his wife does. Stop depriving one another except by agreement for a time, so that you may devote yourself to prayer and then coming together again, so that Satan will not tempt you because of your lack of self-control. So obviously one of the questions that they asked him was, or talked about was, hey, they were doing all kinds of weird things, like, okay, saying, well, I don't want to have sex, I'm doing this, or I don't want to, I don't want you to touch me because I'm over here, and just a lot of weird things that Paul was getting into. And he says, your body's not your own, whichever side you're on. And it's actually not sides. The two shall become one. But if you're doing that for a short time to pray, possibly fast, and get some spiritual juice from God, that's okay, but you be in agreement about that and then come back together so that you're not, one or the other is not tempted. And apparently they were like cutting each other off for months or whatever. It's no real specificity of it, but obviously some things were going on. Verse 6, but this I say by way of concession, not a command. So he's saying, this is probably what you should do. It's not a hard and fast command, a rule, a law. Verse 7, yet I wish that all men were even as I myself am. Paul was single, never married. However, each has his own gift from God, one in this way and one in the other. So, meaning some are able to stay celibate, some are not. And he brings this up multiple times in this whole discussion. Verse 8, but I say to the unmarried and to the widows that it is good for them to remain as I am, meaning single. But if they do not have self-control, let them marry, for it is better to marry than to burn with passion. So Paul is also saying that some of this, what I'm saying, is from me, the apostle who was taught by Jesus, and some of it is teachings from God. And he's very specific, and he points out when it's him and when it's God's command. So the thing of it, if it's Paul's think so, Paul's pretty up on God things, so I think it has some merit. Let's see. So then he goes from this subject, goes into subject for the married folk. Verse 10, but to the married I give instructions, not I, but the Lord. Okay, so here again, he says, okay, we're back to, this is what the Lord says, that a wife is not to leave her husband, but if she does leave, she must remain unmarried or else be reconciled to her husband. Otherwise, if she remarries, then she is in adultery. Same for the husband. And the husband is not to divorce his wife. So basically he's saying, you get married, you stay married. Work it out. Figure it out. So there are some exceptions to marriage and divorce. One of the exceptions, everyone's easily knows this one. One is adultery. One of them is sleeping with somebody else. You have grounds to divorce. Another is abandonment, and we will get to that in verses 12 and 13, where there is abandonment, where one of them just takes off. And third one is abuse. Malachi 2:15 and 16 talks about God is against violence against other people. So if there is abuse going on, that there is grounds and reasons to get away from that. But as we talked about in the last podcast at length, abuse does not always have to be physical. It can be verbal abuse. So a man or woman will say, well, I've never hit her, I've never hit him. Yet when you listen to them, they verbally slap each other every chance they get. And you're just like, oh, wow, this is out here in public. This is out here where other people hear it. Imagine when the front door closes, what is being said in the house. And this verbally slapping another person, this is abuse, and it needs to stop. And if you're in it, get out of it. If you're in it and can't get out of it, get some help. Because verbal abuse, whether it's husband to wife, wife to husband, either of those to the kids, in any direction whatsoever, is wrong. The home is supposed to be a place of safety. And speaking of the kids, it is supposed to be a place that the kids can come and feel safe and feel secure. When they go out in the world, there's trouble in the world. But when they come home, they should have a safe place. If they're getting verbally abused, one, that person is in danger of the fire of hell, but they're also damaging that person just as much as if they hit them. So it needs to stop. He goes on, verse 12. But to the rest I say, not the Lord, so again, he's very specific, that if any brother has an unbelieving wife and she consents to live with him, he must not divorce her. Aha. And so obviously there was this, well, I'm married to someone who doesn't believe in Jesus and God, so can I just get rid of them? And this is what he's addressing here. And she consents, you must not divorce her. Verse 13, and if a woman has an unbelieving husband and he consents to live with her, she must not divorce her husband. For an unbelieving husband is sanctified through the wife, and an unbelieving wife is sanctified through her believing husband. For otherwise the children would be unclean, and now they are holy. Yet, verse 15, yet if a unbelieving one leaves, abandonment, let him leave. A brother or sister is not under bondage in such a case, but God has called us to peace. For how do you know, wife, whether you will save your husband, or how do you know, husband, whether you will save your wife, meaning if you stay together? So a couple things here. One is just a story that popped into my head, was a woman who lived with an abusive husband. She was a Christian. He was not. She stayed with him because he wanted to stay together, but he was very verbally abusive to her for 30 or 40 years. I can't remember the exact, a long time. And she stayed in the marriage. She fulfilled her duties as a married person, and it was like a week or two before the guy died, he actually came to know Jesus as a Savior. So she put up with years of abuse, and then he finally recognized who Jesus was and was saved. Does that always happen? No. So one of the comments that while I was doing this was, so the unsaved one is sanctified by the believing one. This can be somewhat confusing because how are they sanctified? Sanctified means that they're saved and set apart for God. So how are they saved and set apart for God if they don't believe? So that can be kind of confusing. So the answer that is me, not God, I had to do it, is kind of like this. So while they're here on the earth, they are sanctified by God because of the believing spouse. However, once that person dies, just like everyone, that person will stand before God and give an account of his own. He will not be looked at as being sanctified in the marriage that he had on earth, because guess what? He's not on earth. You are now standing before God, being judged based on your own sanctification, which their own sanctification, by themselves, is that they're not sanctified because they don't believe in Jesus, they don't believe in God. and they're standing there in judgment based on their own belief, and in their own belief in God, their own belief in Jesus, and it's not a good day for them. So it goes on in verse 17:24. He says, "Only as the Lord has assigned to each one, and God has called each, in this way let him walk." And so I direct in all the churches. So I direct this. So he's saying, I'm not just saying this to you. I say this to all the churches. Was any man called when he was already circumcised? He is not to get uncircumcised. Not sure how that happens, but has anyone been called in uncircumcision? He is not to get circumcised. So, thank you, Paul. Circumcision is nothing, and uncircumcision is nothing. But what matters is keeping of the commandments of God. Each person is to remain in that state in which he was called. So he's saying, this was answering some of the Judaizers who come in and said, oh, you got to be sanctified, or you have to be circumcised. Yeah, you can be a Christian, but you have to be circumcised. And Paul is saying, no, you stay the way you are. And he goes on even more in verse 21. Were you called as a slave? In other words, were you called to God and you were a slave at that time? Do not let it concern you, but if you are also able to become free, take advantage of that. For the one who has called to the Lord, who was called in the Lord as a slave, is the Lord's free person. Likewise, the one who was called as free is Christ's slave. But verse 23, you were bought with a price. Do not become a slave of people. Brother and sister, each one is to remain with God in the condition in which he was called. So there was obviously some stuff going on with, I'm a slave. I accept God, so now I should be free. And that he's saying, no, stay in that. If you're offered that, take it. But otherwise, you stay in the same position. Because you accept God, that doesn't change your position. But if you have a chance, then take it, do it. So he contrasts a slave versus free. So it was a different slavery back then too. A lot of times the person had a debt to the person, so they became enslaved to that person until that debt was paid off. Sometimes people indebted themselves to another person because they had no other means to pay whatever they needed to survive, and so they would indebted themselves to someone so that their family can survive. Verse 25 through 40. Now there's some things in here that gets kind of weird from our perspective in our day, but we'll get through it. Oh gosh. Verse 25 through 40. Now, concerning virgins, I have no command from the Lord, but I am offering direction as one who by the mercy of the Lord is trustworthy. So Paul is given direction as the one who, he's been around a while. This is Paul's wisdom, what Paul in his wisdom thinks should happen. I think then that it is good, in view of the present distress, he's talking about what's going on in Corinth, that it is good for a man to remain as he is. Are you bound to a wife? Do not seek release. Are you released from a wife? Do not seek a wife. But if you marry, you have not sinned, and if a virgin marries, she has not sinned. Yet such people as yourself will have trouble in this life, and I am trying to spare you. So Paul's pointing out that if you stay single, you will have less conflict. And certainly if you are married, you'll know that. It really doesn't have to be, I mean, he's talking about marriage here, but it can be any two people. You put two people together and there's going to be conflicts. I think this. No, I think this. And there's going to be conflicts, and I don't think anybody can challenge that. I don't know any two people who come together in a friendship or in a marriage that don't have challenges and conflicts. And he's just saying that what I'm trying to do is spare you that extra conflict. But majority of people get into the conflict, and conflict is not always bad. But this I say, brother, the time has been shortened, so that now those who have wife should be as those who have none, and those who weep should as though they did not weep, and those who rejoice as though they did not rejoice, and those who buy as though they did not possess, and those who are in the world as though they did not make full use of it. For the present form of this world is passing away. So he's making a point here. He's saying now that Jesus came, the end of time as we know it is coming. We know that the end will come, and he's just saying, we're concerned about all these things, but understanding because the time is shorter, that the daily life things should not necessarily be so pressing on us in our daily lives, that important thing is God and God's kingdom. Certainly you do living, but he's saying don't focus on that as much as focus and be concerned about the kingdom of God. He's not being weird here. He's just saying that we need to change our focus from day to day to the kingdom thinking, is basically what he is saying. Verse 32, but I want you to be free from concern. One who is unmarried is concerned about the things of the Lord, how he may please the Lord. The one who is married is concerned about things of the world, how he may please his wife. Now, he's not saying that you if you're married, you're not concerned about things of God and the kingdom of God, but he's just saying your attention is not single focused, it is double focused, because you're also focusing on the wife or the husband or the kids and feeding them, and that, so you have other concerns, where if you're single, then you can focus more on the Lord and his work. Verse 33, but the one who is married is concerned about the things of the world, how he may please his wife, and his interests are divided. And the woman who is unmarried and a virgin is concerned about things of the Lord, that she may be holy both in part, in body and spirit. But the one who is married is concerned about things of the world, how she may please her husband. So he's just saying that this is the way it is. He would say, I would prefer you do this, but he's saying, just understand what you're doing. If you're single and you decide, I want to get married, I need to get married, that's my goal, understand that these things, this is the way life is, whether you're single or you're married. Verse 35, I say for you, your own benefit, not to put restraints on you, but to promote what is appropriate and to secure undistracted devotion to the Lord. But if anyone thinks that he is acting dishonorably towards his virgin, if she is past her youth, and it ought to be so, so she should be old enough, let him do as he wishes. He is not sinning, let him marry. But the one who stands firm in his heart, if he is not under constraint, but has authority over his own will, and has decided this in his own heart to keep his own virgin, he will do well. It's a little confusing. So he's saying, if you have a virgin that you want to marry, then, do it. If in your heart you have someone, but you haven't committed to that marriage, and you're like, I probably need to not do that. Okay, don't do that. Concentrate on the Lord. I told you there's some weird things happening in Corinth. You got to remember, they come out of pagan worship, Roman worship, where it was a free for all. You could do anything, and nothing was forbidden. And they're trying to figure out now, how do we do in the past, in the future? And Paul's like, yeah, no, it has nothing to do with that. This is the way it is. Verse 39, and we're getting to the end here. A wife is bound as long as she lives, but if her husband dies, she is free to marry to whom she wishes, only in the Lord. In other words, so if your husband dies, or your wife, you're free to marry, but it should be someone who is also a believer. But in my opinion, she is happier if she remains as she is, unmarried. And I think that I also have the Spirit of God. So he gives a big contrast between marriage. Are you married? Best to stay single. You can focus on God. If you can't do that, then get married so that you don't burn with lust. If you're married, you stay in the marriage, you don't get out. There are some reasons to get out, which we discussed. And so Paul goes through that whole busyness of marriage, talking about the life in marriage. And that ends then chapter 7. We will go on to chapter 8, where he continues talking about other daily things that they apparently wrote to him and wanted his opinion on. And we will get to that next time.